Hi, Lauren and Taylor, and Josh. My name is Shea. I'm a faculty member at Columbia Basin College, where I teach theater classes, mostly performance and children's theater classes. I also work as a director, and I've worked at a couple universities and colleges, as well as been a student at a four-year university and also at an MFA program. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over well, not sort of, I'm going to go over a few things that you might want to know before you start applying for schools. We're going to go through some application processes for different kinds of schools, and then I'm going to talk to you about choosing a school, choosing a major, and then internships and stuff like that. And then we'll also talk about scholarships and different things like that, just things that maybe like stuff I didn't really get taught about in when I was going to like counseling meetings in high school and stuff, especially as a first time college student for my family. I sort of was flying solo, so things that I wish they would have just told me, because it's really not as hard as people make it sound. It can just be kind of tedious. So um, I'm going to share screen, and we're going to go through some stuff. So the first thing is there are really, and I'm going to talk mostly about theater, but a lot of it can be applicable to different things. So the first thing is there are three types of colleges, at least for theater. There are two-year schools, and I guess maybe more than three because they kind of have subplots. But two-year schools like Columbia Basin College is primarily a two-year school where you get an AA degree. There's also like 1 year, 2 year certification programs. There are 4-year schools where you can get a bachelor's, bachelor of arts, bachelor's of science, or a bachelor of fine arts. And then conservatories, which can do completions certificates or professional training certifications or BA, BFAs. Uh, so the first thing is like, well, what do you want to do? I think a big thing for me was uh, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to work in the theater, and I just kind of let that little kid dictate the rest of my life. And so as I got older, I kept doing plays, community theater stuff, working at different schools, doing some small professional work, and then uh, that it sort of reassured me that that's what I wanted to do and working with the schools I was attending. So when I was looking for programs, I was pretty dead set on San Diego State University. I liked how big it was. I liked the area that it was in, and I liked the faculty. But ultimately, I just couldn't afford it. I didn't get any scholarships. It was it just was really out of my price range, coming from a lower income family, first time college student. And so I ended up going to Humboldt State University, which was more affordable. I also had friends that were going there, and so it made the transition a little bit easier. Um, but a lot of the big things I'm going to talk about are what I've already kind of touched on was faculty, the classes that they're teaching, where they are, class sizes, their reputation and alumni, um, and the kind of degrees that they offer. So when I was looking at programs, I knew I wanted to get a Bachelor of Arts. I didn't want to do a BFA because BFAs are much more concentrated, where you primarily take like acting classes or technical classes. You don't get to branch out as much. Of course, you do your general education classes, but within your own area, you're kind of more limited. So I knew I wanted to study acting and be in plays, but I also wanted to learn a little bit more about the things that were around it. So a liberal arts BA theater arts degree was what I wanted to do. Um, but something that if you're not as dead set as I was when I was going into school, is summer programs. These can be internships, or they can just be offerings in different areas that you're interested in. So if you're like, man, I don't know if I want to study theater, or if I really like this different science thing, or if I like, fine art, look for summer programs. Look for schools that are offering summer stuff, or look for different places maybe in your area, or in areas that you're interested in looking at going to school, and see if there's any sort of summer programming where you can like take a class or do an apprenticeship, just something that can get you a taste of what that profession is and a taste of what that learning could be, and then maybe give you a better sense of it. But also, if you choose a degree and you choose to study something, you're not also locked into that. When I went to graduate school, I got my BA in theater arts with an emphasis in performance, and then I went to get my Master's of Fine Arts in directing. But I also, when I was in grad school, there were colleagues of mine that had biology degrees that were coming to get their masters in theater. So you're not locked into anything. So if you end up getting an AA or a bachelor's or a Bachelor of Fine Arts in something theater related or science related, you can still ultimately do whatever you want. Because you change through life and things change. So summer programs. Then as you look at college type, as you start to figure out like, okay, I want to study theater. Maybe you want to be an actor. Maybe you want to be a designer of some kind, a stage manager. There's so many different fields that you can go into with theater. And so you start looking at what can you afford. Um, Before you start looking into loans or anything, just kind of assess what can I afford? Is my family going to be able to support me in any way? Are there people in my life that can help me go to school financially? Um, and what kind of scholarships are available for me to apply for? And you want to make sure that you're pretty thorough about those things. So if you know that you and your family can put in X amount of money, and then there are X amount of scholarships available that you can apply for, um, and if you're okay doing some loans, be careful with those. But if you're okay doing loans, if for some reason you don't get a scholarship, just know those things. Um, so, for example, if you wanted to go to if you wanted to go to a 2-year school, so I teach at CBC. We not only offer scholarships at the college level, but we also offer scholarships at the program level. So when you're looking at the school and you're going through the financial aid things, um, pay attention to the scholarships that you're eligible for, but also apply for as much as you can, and make sure that um, there are scholarships um, that pertain to you and things that you feel really confident about. If you do meet the qualifications but you're nervous about it, just apply. You never know. And then also look at the specific program you're interested in applying for. So not only does the college offer things, but the programs do. Like in the theater program, we have a couple full ride scholarships where we can help you and pay for 2 years of school. A lot of programs do that, and a lot of programs at different schools do that, but people often don't think to look beyond the campus scholarship opportunities. So make sure you look at what the campus is offering and the individual programs are offering you. And apply for all of them, and apply for all of them early. Things you're going to need for scholarships that you want to pay attention to. They'll want a letter of interest. They'll want why should they give the money to you? What are you going to do with it? How can this impact you in the long term? They'll usually specify what they want in those, but it's a letter basically selling yourself and saying, I need this because I want to go to school, first generation. I want to do this with my career and my life, and I think this would be the best way to do it. Letters of interest. You're also going to need references, most likely references from teachers and references from maybe professional or non-academic references. You typically can't use friends or family, so make sure that if you do use someone who's a friend of yours, that you've also like done plays with them, or you've done projects with them outside of a classroom or maybe in the classroom. But they're going to want, I'd probably start making a list and contacting people of like 3 to 5 and rotate them. So that way not the same 3 people aren't getting phone calls or emails from all of your scholarships. Try and change them up when you can, so that way not everyone is getting the brunt of it, because that can really wear people out because they're probably not doing references just for you. So 3 to 5 references that you rotate, and then letters of support, letters of reference, and what these letters are going to do to support you are, and the best thing to do for these kind of letters when you're asking for them, is make sure it's specific to a scholarship. Knowing a little bit about how scholarships work, they're going to want it to be specific to that application. So if you're going to ask, like, let's say, Taylor, you're going to ask Josh for a letter of recommendation, right? In that letter, you want to say, hey, I'm applying for these 3 scholarships. They each are talking about, what are my strengths? Why would I benefit from this? And what was I like to work with? And you want to give him those specifics, so that way when he writes a letter, it's speaking to that specific scholarship. And so that way you don't have a lot of general letters. Because if it's in general, like, oh, Lauren's great, she's great to work with, I had fun doing this, and I think you should give her money, it's not going to be as useful as a letter saying, I know she's applying for CBC. I know the program well. I think she would thrive here because of these three supporting factors. So you want to make sure it's as specific as you can. Depending on how many you apply for, that might not always be possible, but whenever you can, the letters of recommendation should be specific for an application or a scholarship that you're going for. Um, and start talking to people about those things before you graduate, because typically you want to give that person like 2 to 4 weeks to write something, and you want to just kind of be like, hey, remember that deadline's coming up, I really appreciate it. um, a lot of applications, they have to send them to the scholarship committee, so they typically don't go through you. Every once in a while they'll be like, turn in your letters of recommendation. um, but so you'll have to make sure that they understand the process, and you want to make it just as simple as possible for that person that you're asking to write for you or to reference for you. Um, and that's kind of right before you even apply to the school. So let's say you're applying. As we go through this, I'm going to show you a couple different things, CBC, Eastern Washington, and Central Washington, just because going out of state, there's out of state tuition. And the cost is a little bit different, but typically the application process is pretty similar depending on the programs you're looking at. I think the only ones where it starts to get, um, the applications get a lot more complex, or if you're looking at Ivy League schools, or if you're looking at certain like BFA or like pre-med type stuff. But for the most part, college applications are pretty similar depending on the level in which you're going into. So you're gathering your references, you're gathering your letter of recommendation, and let's say you've narrowed down 3 schools. You know you want to go, you either want to do an AA or you want to go straight to a 4-year. And so now how do you narrow that down? Um, a big part of that is location. Like, where do you want to live? Where do you want to move to? Is there places you've been to that you liked? Um, I thought Humboldt, when I went for my undergrad, I thought it was beautiful. The campus is in the redwood forest, and and you can see the ocean from the campus. There's a lot of cool local theater companies. It's a really cool kind of throwback, like free love type of community. And I just really liked the vibe. I liked the people that were there, and I really loved the kind of nature aspect of living there. And that was just the location. I also thought the faculty were very impressive. There's some faculty that teach there, like Ray Robison. At the time, Jody Sikis was teaching there, who was a really great designer. So there was just people there that I knew I wanted to study with. There were people there that I knew I would get a lot of education from, and there were people that I knew I could ultimately use to find work in the industry. The curriculum, I also liked the classes they were teaching. Not only did they have like a beginning, intermediate, and advanced acting track, but they also had, they offered directing courses, and they had some pretty cool theater history classes. And they also offered things like classical acting and stage combat and movement and stuff that not a lot of colleges offer. And the class sizes were smaller. They had enough faculty that we would usually have 15 people in our acting classes, which is still pretty big, but smaller than if you were going to an even bigger school, like at San Diego State, where I went and I looked and I really liked. Their classes were pretty big, and which is fine as well, because their programs has an incredible reputation, and their professional contacts are even more robust. And then the reputation at Humboldt was very good. They had just hosted the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival. They had some pretty notable alumni, such as like the creator of SpongeBob went to Humboldt, and there were some people that had left the film and theater program that worked in the industry that was really impressed with. And the people that I graduated with, a lot of them still work. I mean, I know people that direct for the NFL now, and people that work and for the Arts Council in California, and other professional film and television actors and designers. So it was just a really cool place to be and a cool place to work. But that helped me narrow things down. I only applied to 4 schools when I was looking at undergrad. That's pretty typical, like 4 to 6, because applications can be kind of expensive, particularly when you're looking at 4-year schools. Just to apply for these places is a couple $100. So you just want to keep that in mind, that you want to really tailor your application so you're not just spending a ton of money applying for stuff, but you're being specific on where you want to go. So that way, when you do get in, it was worth it. So start narrowing that down. You kind of are thinking, okay, maybe I want to stay closer to home, or I want to stay in Washington, or maybe I want to go to the other side of the state, or I want to go to California. Just start thinking of those things and start looking at those areas and start thinking about faculty, classes, location, class size, reputation of the program, and think of the reputation not necessarily in a local sense, but in an industry sense. So the alumni and who is leaving and the reputation of the program is how many people that graduate there are still working in the industry. What's their training program like? What is their rate my professor, right? You want to think of those things because a lot of times communities aren't always as supportive of the campus as they should be, and people don't always have the kind of national insight to a program that that other people do, like CBC, for example. Like the people that I work with at CBC, like Ron Campbell, he's a designer that works in the industry, and people know him. And so, and I've worked with, before I started teaching here, I've not only worked with him at different theaters, but I've worked with students of his at multiple theaters. And so that reputation is very positive from an industry standpoint. And actually how I ultimately learned about the school was through working with people that actually went here. So start thinking of those things. And as you start to narrow down and figure out where you're going, it'll just get more specific for you. So now let's start looking at how to apply for places. So we're going to start at a 2-year school. This is Columbia Basin College where I teach. You just go to their admissions page. So apply early. Most places will say that. They have application deadlines. So if you're going to, when are you going to start? So if you're starting fall 2020, you need to have it applied by March 1st. And the application deadline ends August 19th. So you have a pretty big window. Winter 2021, you have from September 1st until December 1st. So we're going to click to apply. So what this has for us is a quick start instructions. Here are the 6 sections that you're going to have to go through to apply to this school. Your personal information, which is typically who are you, how do we get a hold of you, where do you live, course of study, so what do you want to study, what's your major, what do you want to focus on. At CBC, sometimes you can just pick the division, I want to be in arts and humanities, or you can specifically say, I want to be in the theater program. The more specific you are, the better, because it's easier to tailor your degree and tailor your education if we know what you want to do. Residency information, race and citizenship information. They ask for those things because it does help with scholarships and helps help to understand just different population things for us on campus. Testing information, so a lot of campuses will have you do something called placement tests, which Lauren and I were just talking about before we started this meeting. And so that is, so you'll take certain tests like math, English, science, to see if you can test out of some classes and ultimately save money and graduate maybe early or easier to graduate on time. If you don't pass those tests, it's not a big deal. That means you just start in English 101 or you start in Math 101. You start in those introductory courses, but if you test out of them, you don't have to take those and you can start at a higher level. And then academic history, and that's normally, did you get a GED? Did you finish high school? What kind of academic background do you have? And so going from a 2-year to a 4-year, that'll be in the form of a transcript. So if you're transferring schools, so you're finishing your AA at CBC and then you're transferring to Central Washington, you would send them your transcript, or you would have the registrar send them your transcripts. So you want to make sure you have all this information before you start the application. And then down here, right, you'll submit all of it, fill out these different sections. I'm not going to open them because I'm not actually applying, but these are how you'll start here, is these 6 things. And so and that's most 2-year schools will ask for a similar set of information, particularly in the state of Washington, and then Eastern Washington. So Program Explorer, so again, most websites have these on sites, so you'll start to see what kind of degrees they offer, and what it would take to apply for these things. So as we get down into here, we are looking at theater again. Sample courses, so just a handful of classes that they offer. They're offering a BA in musical theater, a BA in theater, minors in dance teaching. And on here, like most sites, they have scholarships. So what are they offering you in terms of scholarships? What are the productions that they're offering? And so we're going to learn more here. So you can contact them. So also, if you're not sure about a program, just email the faculty and ask them some questions. Degree options, scholarship options. So let's click on musical theater BA. Tons of information here on how it works. Again, applying for scholarships. You can request information. So colleges will actually send you like a little packet of information that you can look up. A list of classes that you would take as a major. And then here at the bottom, on the bottom of everything, applying for the campus. So you come, and then again, are you coming in as a freshman? Are you coming in as a transfer? How to apply. So let me move this out of the way. So they have a $60 application fee, which is pretty standard. You'll submit test scores or test alternatives. So this is your placement tests, SATs, ACT, GPA, your Cambridge scores, your high school transcripts. They'll ask for which your high school will be able to send them. If you're a transfer, you'll submit college transfers. You'll need to do a FAFSA. This is for anything that you're applying to or college that you're applying to. A FAFSA is not only can tell you, it helps them understand your financial situation, but also can offer you scholarships, grants, which you don't have to pay back, and loans. And so it kind of helps understand that. So move this back over here again. So if you're coming in winter, spring, summer, you'll click on these. I'm clicking on fall. You'll create a username and password, and you'll start that process. And it'll cover those basic things of who are you, where are you from, what do you want to major in, what's your academic history. Because of how this process works, you'll just want to make sure that you also understand how to get transcripts from your high school to the college. Typically, it's a simple email, or they might have a thing on there for you to fill out on their website, but it's different based on where you're going. And now I'm going to look at Central Washington University only because they have a BFA program. And so where I went to graduate school at the University of Idaho, we also had a BFA. And typically how they would work is you would apply and you would get into the school and you would start as a BA or a Bachelor of Arts. And then you would have to audition to get into the BFA. And the BFA is much more concentrated. The way I view it is the BFA is more concentrated. You're focusing on more specifically acting or directing or design with a more limited relationship to the other areas in terms of your course load. And then it's also if you're planning on going straight from school to the profession. A BA, you can do the same thing. I mean, I did that after I graduated with my bachelor's, but it also is most people who get a BFA don't typically go to graduate school. I mean, of course you can, it's not a big deal, but that's usually farther down the road. So they have testimonials, request information about it, kind of applying to Central Washington. We're going to say first year student. So again, you're going to make an account. It's going to have some information on here that you're going to have to fill out for yourself. And all of it's just right here on the front. And so as you go through this, again, it's kind of the same basic thing. And the only thing that's going to be different about this is at a certain point, I don't know if Central still does this, but you might have to submit, again, your letter of intent. And if you want to go into the BFA, you'll probably have to schedule an audition. And so if that's something that you're looking at a BFA program, they'll either have you schedule a time to come to the campus to audition for them, or they'll ask you to record yourself and send to them audition information. And so if that happens, then you want to make sure that You have at least 2 to 3 monologues, 60 to 90 seconds in length. Or if you're a designer, then you want to make sure you have a digital portfolio and a way for them to access your work, and maybe even having an artist statement if that is of interest to you. So let me. Thank you, Josh. So, are there any questions so far about anything that we've talked about or anything? It's pretty straightforward. It's a lot. I think once you kind of start narrowing things down, it becomes much less stressful than people make it out to be. The only thing is they can be kind of time consuming. So even though the steps are pretty simple, like even for CBC, they're pretty simple. CBC and Central and Eastern, they're pretty simple processes, but they just take a while. So when you start these applications, typically they'll take between half an hour to an hour. Um, just depending on the kind of information that they want. So just make sure you plan those things out. And you'll also have to pay for them at the end of the application. So they can't see anything until you've paid it. So make sure that you have the money available, or you have you or your parents' card ready to pay that at the end so it submits and they can see that information. So the last thing I'm going to go over is just a few things that are just important information that you might want to have, especially if you're going to be studying theater. For actors and stage managers, look into what the Actors Equity Association is. Make sure you kind of have a basic understanding of what that is. Um, Look at potentially getting a subscription to American Theater Magazine. This is a trade magazine that keeps people up to date with what's happening in the industry in America. It's a really great resource. It's pretty inexpensive, but if you can get a subscription to that, or go in on a subscription. I know when I was in college, a group of friends and I bought a subscription together, and we would just share the magazine. They publish plays in it. They do these great articles just about what's going on. So just look into that. Also, as you're going into school, look at potentially going and looking at Art Search. This is another, it's a bulletin list that you can look at: professional, looking for work, looking for places to go to graduate school. Cover letters, make sure you're working on cover letters and having that ready to go when you're starting to apply for things. Um, Look at things like have a basic understanding of EDIA, equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility is an acronym that's really prevalent in the industry, and understand really what it means, the different words: equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. Again, make sure you understand FAFSA and do those for yourself. If you haven't already, I recommend switching to having a Google account. This is because a lot of campuses use them. CBC, we use Microsoft Outlook, but Google is a pretty standard thing that you want to have. Like maybe don't have a Hotmail. That might not be helpful to you. Um, make a thing that's really I think important for campuses to be a part of and programs to be a part of, and you as a student, if your department's not involved in this, you can still be a part of it. But that's the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival. See if your program participates in that, and see how involved they are, because I can tell you from experience that it really shaped not only my perspective as an educator, but it really has set me up for working in the industry as much as I do now. Um, the new Play Exchange, it's really inexpensive. I'm actually going to share screen again just real quick so you can see what this is. It's the new Play Exchange, so it's an online resource where thousands of plays are posted each year, and they're typically unpublished and living playwrights. And so you get firsthand look at new plays being developed. You can get a $10 a year subscription, or a $12 a year subscription as a reader. It's such an incredible resource. I know my students, I really encourage all of them to use it. And as you go through CBC, with at least in my 2-year program, you typically will have to get one to do my classes. That's how I use my plays. And I know a lot of faculty that do that. It's not only a great resource to stay in touch on what's being written today and the kind of work that's being produced around the country, but also a great networking tool, because you can recommend scripts and playwrights can see that. And a lot of times they'll reach out to you. And so you can start building relationships to playwrights that are working in the industry, industry, and it's really invaluable. Like, I cannot stress enough how important new play exchange is right now to how the industry is being shaped and how plays are being shared and produced in America. Look at the Screen Actors Guild Association, making sure that you know what that is, because if you're an actor, SAG will probably be part of your life the same way Actors Equity is. Make sure to look at, have a kind of a basic knowledge or awareness of like Stanislavski, um, USITT, United States Institute for Theater Technology, Young Arts. It's a foundation program based in Miami that identifies the most accomplished high school artists and provides them with creative and professional development opportunities throughout their careers. So those of you that are still in high school, look at Young Arts and see if they're having any. This summer they'll probably have like things like this where it's video workshops, but it's really a good, great resource to connect to the industry even before you go to college. So Young Arts is a great resource. And the last thing is taxes. Just you're not gonna be doing taxes yet, but just think about that, because as you go as the older you get, um, that's one thing I wish we had, like a class on taxes, because that stuff's going to come up. And also when your parents, if you're still a dependent, you're going to need to have the information on your scholarships, grants, and loans and tuition that you're going to have to give to your parents every year as you go through college, because it's deductible on their taxes. And that's something I didn't know, and my parents didn't know either because they didn't go to school until it came tax season, and they had to get all that information, and I didn't know how to do it at first. So just keep that in mind. Once the new calendar year begins, just start looking at how to get that information available for when you or your parents are doing taxes, because it's stuff you're going to have to get a hold of. Okay, I know that was a lot. Any questions or any concerns or anything that it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward stuff. If you ever have questions in the future, you can always reach out to me through the ACT Facebook page, and Josh will get a hold of me and I can answer questions. But if not, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Josh, do you have anything?
I do not actually. Yeah. Thank you both so very much for being
Yeah.
here and taking the time. Yeah.
Thanks so much, everybody.